Welcome to the chaos sector. Briefly, the claim that Gonzalez and Mogan took an Uber home can't be confirmed. It doesn't matter what has been reported. Haven't you guys got that yet? You have to filter through everything to find the truth. I believe he took them home and wanted to protect his identity at that time and stated he took them home, and this is when the quote, hoodie guy, was cleared of being a suspect. Once again, you have to look past the wall of what the media, and even the authorities, put out there, because this is clearly a cover-up. Now, let's address that very issue, the cover-up. Let's reiterate first, to establish our theory. Kohberger would have had a connection to these individuals, right? He resides in Pullman, they reside in Moscow, at some point their paths crossed. He becomes, quote, obsessed with one of the girls, and tracks her all the way to 1122, King Road. So far, it's not impossible. But, this narrative starts to crumble when there is no evidence of Kohberger being obsessed with one of those girls. Yet, this has been claimed by Mark Furman, and others have spread this narrative throughout social media. And, there was even a claim that there is, quote, digital evidence that Kohberger attempted to DM Kaylee Gonzalez, right? If there is evidence of this, why hasn't this been released? Why haven't the authorities made a public statement regarding this? This is a motive. One of the victims was being stalked by Kohberger. She suffered more severe injuries. His DNA is found in a bedroom where she was found deceased. Yeah, he is not given reasonable doubt here. He is guilty of murder. But, stop the presses, this has never been confirmed to be true. And if this isn't true, yet the media and so-called law enforcement sources have claimed they have evidence of Kohberger stalking one of the victims, then we have deception from the media and law enforcement sources regarding a murder investigation. That leads to the theory of Kohberger being framed for those murders. Off that alone, right? Like mentioned prior, Kohberger has been cleared in our analysis. There is no real evidence against him. No surveillance of Kohberger spotted in that area months prior, about 12 times, yet they claim there was. No surveillance of his vehicle driving near the home the night of, yet they claim there was. No surveillance of him spotted in a grocery store later that day, yet they claim there was. Timestamps of his travel in that area has been presented. There isn't proof without surveillance to verify it, yet they claim it was. No evidence of him stalking one of the victims, yet they claim there was. If you have no evidence of all of this, how can you convince the public he is guilty, or even, a suspect? You can't, unless propaganda is used. The only so-called evidence is the DNA found on a knife sheath, right? But they trace this DNA by collecting his father's DNA to match the DNA of that very knife sheath? Why didn't you just sample Kohberger's DNA once more? Because they did it in reverse. They raided the home first, grabbed some trash, extracted the DNA of his father, planted it on a knife sheath. You got it, we already explained this nonsense. That fuckery is the only so-called evidence against Kohberger, which he states to his defender, quote, that is not me, unquote. They are challenging this evidence because it places Kohberger at the scene of the crime. He didn't enter into any sort of plea bargain, he didn't want extradition, he is literally facing everything head-on. And that type of confidence means either he is a psychopath who murdered those college students and is bringing his criminology studies to real life, or he is determined to prove his innocence in front of the nation. Let's address it right now, before someone even thinks it. Okay, they had the door unlocked. It's a party house, they've never had any violence in the neighborhood, everyone knows each other, no need to lock the door, at least at that point. But Kohberger wouldn't know that. What if the door was locked? How would he get in? He would have to force his way in, and that surely would ruin everything. Translation, there were two killers. Who knew the code to get in? Let's move on. The killers were on foot, hiding in the bushes somewhere observing the home. Using a knife as a weapon indicates stealth. If it were guns, then it doesn't matter if they drove up to the home, because the job is about rapid timing, shoot the victims, drive off quickly. But using a knife indicates stealth, silence, catching the victims off guard to attack them at close range. What do we assume here? The killers, yes killers, were already near the home. The killer's vehicle was parked somewhere close, and they walked to the home. Or, they perhaps didn't have a vehicle, because they knew the area, and lived close by. I envision two suspects, dressed in all black at night, which provides a camouflage within those dark areas. And this is why I suggest they were traveling in the grassy regions on the property. And approach the sliding doors from the back of the home. Examine. From the drone view, we see the back area of the home. There's a road that loops around the victim's home, right? That road is called Queen Road, which is actually a dead end. Although it's a dead end for vehicles, it's not a dead end for pedestrian travel. This may be where the killers came from. The killers traveled through the backyard, where large trees and bushes are. You can't be spotted by surveillance if you're traveling through large trees and bushes, right? Approaching the home, from that angle, you have Mogen's bedroom in view, and also Mortensen's bedroom. Kernodle's bedroom is on the opposite side. They split up, one heads into Kernodle's room, while the other heads upstairs to Mogen's room. Now if you have two killers with knives, it is more logical that 4 victims could be stabbed to death, instead of one killer with a knife. Understand? There is a key factor to their quote, success. It's been speculated by many on social media, yet we will just come out and say it. Someone in that home gave the green light. I'm sorry, but it was executed too strategic not to have a guide. Mortensen, more than likely, was the guide. Remember, she was awake during the entire time frame. She knew where everyone was located in the home, and she was not harmed in any way. Mortensen opened and closed her door throughout the attacks, and this indicates that she checked to make sure everything went down successfully. Although Funk was allegedly asleep at some point during that night, we have to assume Funk had awakened. I can't believe that Funk was not notified by Mortensen a suspect had just exited that home. And this is another element of Mortensen's accounts that had been, well, adjusted in the affidavit. If Mortensen had stated she notified Funk downstairs, it magnifies how both of them didn't notify the authorities at that point. And to make matters worse, waiting even longer to notify the authorities. So based on logic, we have Funk awake approximately from 4:25 a.m. till later that morning. We can also suggest she was already awake before the murders. Yep, seems likely. The killers exit the home, as Mortensen observes, and locks herself in her room, realizing what she had just participated in. This time frame would be the reason for no call to the authorities. It was too early to call. Mind you, the police department is about 5 minutes from that home. The authorities would be there quite fast, before she could even get her story straight. Also, it would eliminate the white vehicle spotted as a potential suspect as well. That narrative was produced by the same media that claims it was spotted in surveillance. Meaning, it didn't exist then, and it wouldn't exist if Mortensen called the authorities soon after. Are we on the same page here? Good. The killers are from Moscow, who knew the victims personally, and had a grudge against the specific individuals who were murdered. And based on our analysis, there was obviously more than one person. 2 killers are more effective in a household full of college students than 1. 2 killers with knives are also more effective than 1 with a knife. They are able to control the situation more effectively, especially if there's someone there who is, well, compliant with what is taking place. 1 killer has to be so calculated, it's almost an element of chance that everything will pan out the way he envisions. Even if he has knowledge of who is inside, where the targets are, he is still just 1 person. In either path you take, he is faced with a defense. If he attacks Kernodle and Chapin on the 2nd floor first, there is no guarantee this will be successful, let alone preparing for his next targets upstairs, right? He stabs them, they bleed to death, and now roommates upstairs are alarmed. They could potentially present a challenge, or someone could call the authorities. The dog could also be a problem. Although it's just a poodle, it's still a dog, which the suspect has to be aware of, right? Who knows, the dog may defend its owner and attack the suspect long enough for Gonzalez and Mogen to escape. Just giving scenarios. But there is a possibility that one of those victims, or even both, are still alive and call the authorities. He hasn't even got upstairs yet, and the authorities are being notified about his presence in the home. If you suggest he went upstairs first to stab Gonzalez and Mogen, the possibility of others being alarmed downstairs exists. And the possibility of that dog being a defensive factor. After stabbing those victims, it's possible he faces a defense from those roommates. And everything that could happen with Kernodle and Chapin applies with Gonzalez and Mogen. The point here, his plan has an unpredictable outcome. And someone who intends on murdering their targets will not rely on unpredictable outcomes. Their plan needs to be executed almost flawlessly. But, if there are 2 killers, then each can attack both floors, and the only individual left as a quote, potential defense, is Mortensen. Funk is on the first floor, sleep through all of this, allegedly. Let's be honest here, no need to tiptoe around what unfolded. Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk are accessories to murder. Many have suspected this, but few were willing to state it. The reason I come to this conclusion is from what has been examined so far. A witness is spared, with the possibility of calling the authorities? What if she tracked his path out of the home, quietly watching him as he got in his car and drove off? She would have a description of the vehicle for the authorities, right? The killer can't allow this to happen, but that's exactly what happened. Which means, she was spared, because she was an accessory. And I will say, I don't think Funk was asleep neither, she was awake as well. But she is staying very quiet, because she may be the weaker link of the two. There's always a weaker link, someone who would crack under the pressure. Mortensen, based on her demeanor, seems to be the quote, aggressor. A bit cunning, but not cunning enough. You can fool some, but not everyone. No way she can survive in that scenario, she would have either been murdered, or at least suffered stab wounds. Remember, it's not as if she saw the killer, and he didn't see her. Negative, he walked right past her, as she watched through her bedroom door. Assuming she was the last one in the home, he would have killed her for sure. What about the dog, and the narrative that there were two killers? Perhaps, the dog was familiar with them. After stabbing the victims, the dog doesn't know how to comprehend what is taking place, because it considers the killer familiar. The dog asks itself, why is he, or she, harming Kaylee? I don't understand. So it whimpers, as it's trying to figure out why the friendly human is harming Kaylee. Here's something interesting, maybe Gonzalez's dog should be a witness, right? Sounds a bit wacky, but it's actually very plausible. The dog would remember the suspect, and their frequency. Like a lie detector from a dog. The dog would bark, indicating Kohberger was physically there that night. Dogs remember damn near everything, due to their heightened senses. But, if the dog does not react, or has no trigger from Kohberger, he is not, I repeat, he is not the murderer. Wow, just put the dog on the stand, and see how it reacts to Kohberger. Damn, that's brilliant, right? The ex-boyfriend took the dog away. The ex-boyfriend. If you recall, Gonzalez's sister publicly stated that the ex-boyfriend was 100% innocent, right? First of all, there is no such thing as 100% innocent unless you have proof. And even still, you can't prove he was not involved. Second, you are not a police officer nor detective, so you can't claim someone is innocent because you have not done the detective work to prove your claim. Now the ex-boyfriend was cleared, but there are no details of his so-called alibi to prove he was innocent. Haven't you noticed that many people in that circle have been cleared, but there is no proof of their innocence? Meaning, there are no details in a police report proving their innocence. We are just supposed to take the authorities' word for it, hey? An ex-boyfriend can be a suspect, because there is a potential motive. He was cleared, and the family of Gonzalez adamantly claimed he was innocent. Could this be based on the denial of the possibility he murdered Kaylee? Sounds likely. And this would explain why the dog was confused. His partial owner is attacking the other owner, surely the dog was extremely confused, right? Just a theory. Many people discredit quote, wild conspiracy theories as to who murdered those college students. I will say this to those people, on a scale of believability, I will take those so-called conspiracy theorists over the mainstream media and the authorities in this case. Because on some surface level, those conspiracy theorists have bits and pieces of direct information regarding this case. The problem though, is nobody will believe them because they lurk throughout threads that only magnify that conspiracy theorist stigma. As far as the media and authorities, they have misled the public about this case, on purpose. I find it also telling that Gonzalez, Mogan, and Kernodle appeared to be more popular. Always seemed happy, having fun, enjoying life. Everyone knows what photo I'm talking about, and that, my friends, is a motive. There is a photo of Mortensen behind Gonzalez, appearing a bit jaded. She is smiling, but the smile appears unnatural. It could just be her personality, but I sense a bit of jealousy. Jealousy. Jealousy can lead to hatred if it doesn't get addressed properly. One can become so jealous that they start to despise that person. And this can lead to very irrational behavior and bad thoughts, even violent thoughts. Let's not pretend this does not exist within such a peer group. We can almost guarantee there was jealousy floating around in that circle. Once again, this is a motive. Jealousy based on social media popularity, which translates to societal popularity, at their college. Jealousy based on one being in a relationship, and you are single. Jealousy based on family background, such as financial status. We know the typical dynamics, which lead to many friends becoming distant. If you can survive those years of peer pressure and the obligation to be quote, cool in your social circle, your friendships will be strong, reaching your mature adulthood. But if you allow anything to compromise that friendship, such as jealousy, it can destroy a friendship and even lead to someone being hurt, emotionally or physically. Yes, this does happen. Do not overlook this dynamic. The reason the theory of jealousy being involved in this case is more prevalent is due to the outcome of that night. We have weeded Kohberger out of any involvement, at least in being guilty of murder. And if he is not the murderer, then obviously it's within the circle or the extensive circle of that peer group. It just points back to who were the survivors, and this is where we started our investigation, remember? The oddities of Mortenson's accounts. They never sat well with anyone, and it's becoming clear now that she either knows who murdered those roommates, or she was involved. Honestly, if she knew who murdered them even without being a part of the conspiracy to murder anyone, she is still technically an accessory to murder because she did not call the authorities, and we have to factor in she was physically aware of everything happening in real time. So she was complicit with what happened. By law, she would be classified as an accessory due to her knowledge of what was taking place. The only difference, we don't know if she was literally a part of the actual plan to murder those roommates. But that's semantics in my opinion, because she did nothing about it. Sure, we can say she was scared, in either theory she was scared. I understand this completely. Yet, we can't continue to give the benefit of the doubt, especially with the possibility that she either is not telling the truth about what happened that night, or she is involved in what happened that night. Either way, she can't be pushed to the back and forgotten. Nor can Funk. I notice they are gradually fading off into the background. They got matching tattoos, right? Well, let not that be a sign of what's to come. In prison. This is the chaos sector.